podcast from Peach 2020, hosted by Peter Martin.
Hello, I'm Peter Martin, founder of Peach 2020, the international network for senior executives, entrepreneurs, and influencers from across the hospitality sector. Welcome to the latest in our new series of Top Table podcasts, which see me in conversation with some of the biggest names in the out-of-home food and drink business, the real movers and shakers, picking up on the issues shaping the future of our industry. Now, one of the few positive things we've seen during the pandemic is restaurant and bar companies trying new initiatives, developing new revenue streams. One that's followed that route, driven in part by the crisis in the UK British fishing industry, is Rockfish, the 9-strong seafood restaurant group based down in the southwest. Its seafood at home service not only delivers fresh fish to your door, but it's developed its own range of tin products too. And on top of that, it's just published a book all about voyages to discovery during lockdown, its own and other people in the industry. It's called Altering Course, the COVID Chronicles. And yes, a sign of the times, you can buy all of these online. So I'm absolutely delighted to say we have with us the founder and CEO of Rockfish, an all-round fish guru, Mitch Tonks, along with the co-author of the COVID Chronicles, industry icon, mentor to many, and Rockfish board member John Barnes. Mitch, John, welcome to Top Table. Now first, John, I probably need to start explaining a bit more about your restaurant legacy. Now, you and I have known each other for many years. You were an investor in two of my businesses, helping me set up M&C Report all those many years ago, and also with Peach Factory. But in the industry, you're probably best known with taking Harry Ramsden's from one shop in Yorkshire to make it an international brand, and then doing a similar sort of journey with Latasca. You're also an author of Marketing Judo, which many people in the industry have read. And of course, you're one of the early Peach industry icons. Now, is there anything I've missed off of your CV, Mr. Barnes?
No, it's too long. I'm so old now that I don't think there's anything I could do that wouldn't take the next 10 minutes. So that's great. Thank you, Peter.
Well, I'm sure we'll all weave that into the conversation we're gonna have now. I suppose the big question is how did you two get involved? Mitch, how did you come across John Barnes?
I went to a conference. I've only ever been to one conference in my life, and John was a speaker, and he did this wonderful talk called Breaking the Chains. And it was really all about empowerment of teams in restaurants and not really getting bogged down with the head office. And I was just starting up a business, and I collared John on the stairs and said, John, I'm starting up this fish thing. It's going really well. I'd love to talk to you because I know that's your thing. And John just sort of a polite conversation, and off he went. And I kind of built that business, and probably 15 years went by. And I looked out of the kitchen one day in the Seahorse, and John was sat with Pat having dinner. And so I came out of the kitchen, introduced myself again, reintroduced myself, and we sat and chatted, and it was really great. And I said, John, I'm thinking about doing a kind of another seafood concept next door to the Seahorse where you're dining. It's going to be a great place. And John said, it's very interesting, great, but I'm retired now. I've got grandchildren. And about a year later, and it was very funny because it was a year later, I'd said to John, look, this thing really is up and running now. Come and have a look at it. So I persuaded him and Pat to come down for a weekend and have a meal. And he wandered into Rockfish and just walked in. By the time I was reminding him yesterday when he got to the second seat, he said, this is fabulous. So this is exactly what I wanted to do. And yes, I'm an investor. And yes, I'm going to join the board with you and help you do it. And that was it. It was a really marvelous moment, actually.
And John, is that how you remember it? Why did you get involved with Mitch Tonks? Because you've been involved with an awful lot of people and mentored a lot of people, including, dare I say, myself over the years.
It was a sort of a moment, a light bulb moment. I walked in there and I thought, this is what we wanted to do at Harry's. You know, we sold in '99 to Granada Compass, and it was an unfinished journey. I mean, when you become a public company, and we'd done 10 years as a public company, and we'd had ups, we'd had downs. We weren't really in control of our destiny, and we were bought out. And I always felt that this is the best thing I've done. And the journey wasn't over. And when I saw what Mitch was doing, it was exactly where we wanted to take Harry's. And I thought, well, I have said I'm not doing anything anymore. I'm out of everything. And this is just too interesting. And honestly, 10 years on, I'm still loving it. It is, the journey is still, still on the way. And we're just doing lots of new things. And it's fish. And, once you get into fish, and I was involved in fish and chips from my days at KFC when I was the MD of KFC in the early 80s. And I kept on looking at fish and chips and wondering why nobody was doing it, branded it. And we did it with Harry Ramsden's. But once you get into that whole world, there's just, it's contagious. It's addictive. And I'm now, sorry about the cliche, but I'm an aficionado. I just love fish, and I love what Mitch does. And frankly, nobody does it better than he does. It's a joy to be part of the team.
To throw in another pun, you've got hooked, but there you go. So, Mitch, in terms of, you've been working with John. John's been on your board all these years. Tell us a bit about what's happened and how you've developed that business up until the pandemic.
I think Rockfish, the Rockfish that John saw in Dartmouth was Rockfish 1. And in those days, I think it was fair to say that our aspiration was really to do good fried fish and, a little bit of grilled. And I became very, very quickly aware that if we wanted to, at the time I wanted to grow it, but I didn't realize the scale we could get to. And that we'd have to start introducing a lot, varying the menu. People weren't going to come back here for fried fish 3 times a week. So over the years, we've just varied the menu. And now I sort of become slightly defensive when people say to me, how are your fish and chip restaurants? I'm like, they're not fish and chip restaurants. They are seafood restaurants. And so we then opened in Plymouth, and I had this very strong feeling that every single one of our restaurants had to be by the sea. I really believe that seafood has a sense of place. When you arrive at the coast, your mind just thinks, I want to eat seafood. It's not thinking steak or Asian food or anything like that. So we deliberately grew the restaurants very, very slowly into the 9 there are. Plymouth Fish Market is great, right the way up to Poole. And gradually we've just been working on delivery, culture, just really doing the basics of building the business. And my ultimate dream was always, and the pandemic allowed it, which we'll talk about in the next part, has always been to have a fully integrated seafood restaurant business that catches its own fish and serves its own fish, something incredibly unique. So that's the journey we've been on really over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in a sense, the pandemic has given you an opportunity to do something which is already always on your agenda. But how badly? We can't escape the fact that the hospitality industry has been hit badly by the pandemic. How did it manifest itself with you, and how quickly did you switch your focus?
I'll give you the first couple of days. Will Beckett, our chairman, and I, we're very lucky to. I'm very, the whole company's lucky to have such a great board of people around. So. The first conversation started with Will talking about closing restaurants, which I can still remember that conversation. Stood on the harbour side, having a conversation about what close all our restaurants, knowing in the back of your mind the implications of that. And we actually decided to close the restaurants early, a quick board call, and we decided to close on the day that it was mandated. So at least we had some time to prepare. But then really, I liken it to being thrown into ice cold water. It was, you were just gasping for air, wondering what to do. And I think it was fair to say that the non-execs were also in the same position, and we had to reorientate ourselves, rethink how we were going to get through it. And we sort of made it our mantra in the early days. Let's protect our people and let's survive. Let's just get through this period. And once we'd worked out how to do that, then the really interesting period started, and we started to have debates about not only can we survive, but how can we come out of this better.
Yeah, and so then you develop the delivery service, seafood at home. How quickly were you able to get that up and running, and how did that change your culture and thinking?
Well, it was really interesting, Peter, because there were 3 big projects in lockdown. We were bringing our fishing boat in, and we were tying it up on the side of the quay and selling fish directly from the boat. And I was amazed at how many people were queuing up every day with plastic containers and bringing their own bags to just buy fresh seafood. It kind of rekindled my love of retail, because I sort of left that behind some time ago. Then we did experience boxes like everybody else. So you buy a meal, and we were amazed at how well they went. And then, I got into like tinning fish and wrote a book. And through the whole process, it was literally a 2-year process that grew from, we could build the box business into actually the way Britain gets its seafood today, sitting on a counter, gone through a very clunky supply chain, using lots of polystyrene, sitting there waiting for somebody to buy it, who then puts it in a bag and then carries it around the store and then puts it in a car to take home. And with all the wastage behind that was felt to me, frankly, archaic. So we decided that not only would we launch something, we would launch something totally disrupt and change the way Britain buys its seafood. So it's been a 2-year project, and we've really thought about it in great detail, just as we would a restaurant, to launch it. It wasn't just a very quick, let's just sell some fish. And we think we've got something really unique and brilliant there that will change things for people.
So, John, when Mitch started talking about this, and presumably it was on the agenda, what were your first thoughts? What did you bring to the party? Because, your background is in, big brand marketing. That's where you started your career back with Unilever, I think, wasn't it?
It was Procter and Gamble, but it was all about the opportunity. I mean, just to sort of prove it. Yesterday, we heard that Tesco are closing all their fish counters. I mean, what an absolute opportunity for us. I mean, the fish counters in retail supermarkets have been shutting. So suddenly there's an opportunity. But my thing has always been, as you'll remember, get the basics right. If you haven't got a core product, it's all right talking about this, but it's huge amount of development. And what the guys have done is just fantastic. If you now order from us and you get it the next morning, and up in Yorkshire, where I'm speaking from, I can have my fresh fish from Brixham, caught by us, delivered to me. And what I can guarantee is that there is absolutely no smell when you open the packaging. And that's always been an issue for the consumer in research. It showed it years and years and years. So it's taken a long time to get the packaging right, a long time to get the base product right, but we've now got the basics right. And the real thing now is building the brand, Peter, because this is new. It's totally new. This is not like the restaurant business. We're direct to consumer. We're in a new world. But it's exciting. It's a whole set of skills. And frankly, with all the supermarkets coming out of fish, it means we've got a real open goal. It's very, very interesting.
So how have you sort of built that business, Mitch, in terms of and new skills you've had to learn?
I mean, I've been in seafood retail since 25 years, Peter. I started behind a fishmonger's counter and grew it into a chain of restaurants. And so I've been lucky enough to have a career that really understands the consumer. I've consulted some big seafood companies as well and been able to get some insight over the years. And one of the things that I always thought was, the biggest thing people used to tell me was, I love fish, I just don't know where to get it and I don't know what to do with it. So what we set about doing was trying to solve people's problems. As John said, smell was one. When a box of fish arrives at your door, there can be a smell. There was polystyrene in it. There's no way in this world we were going to send anything to people's houses in polystyrene with water. We also recognized that people wanted help to cook it, which is obviously we've been able to provide that relatively simply. People wanted to know provenance, so we've been able to link every piece of fish that we buy, not only from our boat, but from other boats, back to the boat, so that people know exactly how their fish has been caught. And also preparation. Very few people at home want to take a whole fish to their house to cook. They want it already portioned. And also things like Dover soles, turbots, brills. These kind of fish normally end up on restaurant tables. So we wanted to make that stuff available to people. So we literally set about solving every single problem about how we do it. And it involved us acquiring 3 different companies that all did different things. We acquired our seafood supplier. We acquired a supplier next door. We acquired a company that was making sauces for retailers and making our tartar sauce for the restaurants, because we were now getting through tons of it a week. And we have put all those together as a business, one ecosystem that can make this project happen with a whole separate team, a whole head of departments. And I love the idea now that people can experience seafood in a Rockfish restaurant, knowing that it's just incredibly fresh, straight off the quay, straight off the boats, and also be able to get that same fish with all those problems solved in their homes. It's just broadening the business rather than just a sort of cookie cutter rollout of restaurants as to where our growth could come from. And what's really interesting, Peter, is we're the only direct to consumer business that has a quayside location. Yeah. We are based 20 meters from where the boats land. We're not based in the Cotswolds somewhere that, buying the fish off the market and roading it up. We are doing exactly what we say on the tin, which is giving people direct access to those boats via us. It's brilliant.
Now, I think one of the things I've noticed in terms of sort of development within the industry, and a lot of it is driven by the at-home services which a number of restaurant brands have developed, is a better focus on marketing, understanding consumers and keeping the communication with consumers there, and actually developing proper CRM databases as well, which perhaps restaurants haven't been that great at. I mean, John, how have you seen that? How have you been able to bring your skills to that?
It's a whole new thing for us, Peter. But I think this is what's so great for the restaurant industry, is that we're being driven into new skills which we need, the digital skills that probably we didn't have. And so this whole new channel of distribution is fascinating for us. I mean, if you talk to Will on Hawksmoor at Home, or you talk to Tom and James at Pizza Pilgrims, they'll talk back to you in terms of the algorithms they're using for their digital marketing. Now, you and I know that would not have happened without these new ventures, Pizza in the Post and Hawksmoor at Home. And it's same as happening for us with Seafood at Home, because we're having to learn and relearn how to communicate with people digitally. And it's fantastic. It's going to help us in our restaurant business, because don't forget, we still have a core restaurant business, which, we're all still very keen to take further, because they're all working, which is pretty rare. But from a marketing point of view, it's a real learning for us. We're learning all the time. We've got Laura Cowan, who I co-wrote the book with, who's phenomenally good and is learning new skills with her team. And no, this is really going to help us. As an industry, we are going to be building brands for the first time properly, in my view, in all the 40 plus years I've been in it. We're now talking about brands with some proper marketing nous, proper understanding of what that means. It's not a label. It's the value that you add to the product, and it's in your head, and it's identifying the consumer you want to target. And I think that's what this is now giving us.
And you're being in front of the consumer for a lot longer than you would be just in terms of them visiting restaurants. You're in their homes.
Well, you think about it like this, Peter. I mean, I said to Mitch yesterday, I found an old speech that I did when we first met. And we did with Young's Seafood, who we got one of them on our board, Steve Leadbeater, who's phenomenally good. He used to run the whole of that business. And with them, we did a product where we approved one of theirs, fish approved by Harry Ramsden's. That was in 2,500 stores. And that took the brand awareness of Harry Ramsden's up by about 40 points. And Mitch and I are absolutely convinced about this. If we get into thousands and millions of homes, what that does for the Rockfish brand is extraordinary. So, we've suddenly got an opportunity to become a household name, which from the Southwest, you would never get that. You'd never get it, however good you were. And the capital that was involved in that would have been enormous. I
mean, the other backdrop to this is, the crisis in the fishing and seafood industry in UK, and particularly down in the West Country. I mean, how bad is it, and how are you seeing that, and how are you being able to help that, Mitch?
I mean, interestingly, Peter, when you say a crisis, the fishing industry is going through a real kind of resurgence here. So since Brexit, I mean, there's been some positive news for the fishermen, even though in the very beginning, I think fish merchants and exporters were affected very, very differently with paperwork, but it's starting to find a resolve. What's become really interesting is the interest from people in Britain for their seafood. So there's been a resurgence of fishmongers, of people online doing things. Fish prices are remaining high, so fishermen are doing well because the Europeans want to buy our fish, and it's really, really good stuff. So it's actually been a really good time for the fishing industry, and I'm really enjoying sort of championing, as I always have been, just how good our British seafood is. It's some of the best in the world, and now we're able to get it to people's homes. Gets me quite excited.
It's interesting because actually, from the outside world, there is a sense that Brexit has caused real problems in the fishing industry, and you're saying people are now coming through that and actually finding a new route to market, which may not be an export market, or if it is an export market, a lot of that red tape is now being overcome.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some challenges for live shellfish exporters, and obviously for exporters from here are always going to be up against a challenge, getting into Europe. But I think the interesting thing I think the one thing the pandemic did for all of us was, in my mind, advanced our relationship with the internet by a decade. So buying things online is just normal. Whereas if you'd have talked to someone 2 to 3 years ago about buying fish online, like it happened, but you never really had a lot of confidence. But now you have confidence in the whole setup, and I think that is really great for our fishing industry, because people in the UK are saying, yes, I want this fish. I want to eat this stuff. It's really important to me that I eat this stuff because a sense of place, and we want to support the industry and eat good fish.
Now let's talk a bit about the book. True chat show fashion, we've got you guys plugging a book on the show, which is great. How did that come about? Because obviously you've got your own story about how people have emerged and navigated their way through the COVID crisis, John. But how did the idea for the book come about?
Well, I was every day. I spoke to Mitch every morning for about 3 weeks. Would you think a month, Mitch? I mean, we literally had morning calls, and it was fascinating because look, we're trying to survive. Are we ever going to reopen? And meanwhile, I got my wife in the background. If you remember, Pat ran a therapy centre. We had a big counselling centre with all the clients, over 1,000 clients a month. Loads and loads of people coming, and they couldn't come to the centre anymore. So she was taking calls from clients who couldn't see their therapists, who were desperate for help, and triaging them to people. And we taught the therapists how to use online, how to go onto Zoom. So this was a whole transformation. So we got that going on in the background. I've got my daughter's business, local food shop, going through the roof because people didn't want to go to supermarkets. They're coming to her. So, and then we got story after story. And Mitch said, look, somebody should be writing this up because there's just so many things happening. We've got the Pizza Pilgrims boys talking to us about their pizza in the post. So Laura Cowan and I, Laura, the marketing person, Mitch said, look, you two, why don't you just write this up? You've written a book before, John. Why don't you do it? So we did. And we called upon people we knew. We didn't want to do the old journalist talking from a distance. We just wanted to find people who we actually knew and what they were going through. Businesses, Hawksmoor, Pizza Pilgrims. We talked. We obviously did Rockfish, and then there were people we knew who were individuals doing new things. So we just captured all those, and we, if you like, we called ourselves like the Samuel Pepys, the chroniclers of COVID. And that gave us the subtitle, Altering Course, the COVID Chronicles. And we're also inspired by one of Mitch's heroes, Henry Bombay, who's a sailor, and all the things he was doing and the language he used. He's, world champion, and the things that he was doing differently to survive. And we used a lot of his language, altering course, because we sort of kind of work by the sea. But we've got some great stories. It's plug time. It's altering course. It's 10 quid, and you can get it on the Rockfish website. But the big thing was Mitch said, look, we do things for other people. And so we're giving all the proceeds to Mind, the charity Mind. There's been a lot of damage and burnout amongst people. And so we're using the book and the stories to inspire people from other people we know to raise money for Mind. And it's a lovely project. I love being back writing again. It's a long time since I was co-writing. Laura was an inspiration with her colleagues and friends, and she knows the head of Sport England, and he put us in touch with a rugby club who are doing completely new things. We've got a story of a woman who's taught people who can't sing to sing online. It's an extraordinary bunch of stories. So, but if it, I'm really flogging it hard here because with every 10 quid goes to mind, and I think it's going to resonate, this book, and it's Mitch and Rockfish paid to sponsor it, for which you're really grateful. So, it's been a great project. We're very proud of it, aren't we, Mitch?
Really, I mean, it was so many learnings, and I think, Peter, when John was bringing back those stories, it was like he was, speaking to people in America all over the place and different people and bringing them back to us, and at the same time sharing our story about how we were coping with it. And I think what really resonated with me with that period was how many entrepreneurs linked up to kind of give each other support and advice and inspiration about how we were all coping with it. And it was an extraordinary period. So as John says, a great read. I loved it when I saw it for the first time, and they both did an amazing job in pulling it together. And it's a great read, and as John said, just an incredible cause.
And I'll recommend it as well. So
thanks,
anyone
Peter.
listening to this, go out and buy it. It's always a good cause, but also really inspirational stuff. So I suppose we look like we're coming out of pandemic at the moment. Who knows what the future may hold? But okay, so what are the next plans for Rockfish? What about the restaurants? Because they're still there.
Well, the restaurants, Peter, are doing exceptionally well. Very, very strong like-for-life growth. We were lucky to have 2 great summers in the middle of the pandemic that were really good as well. So we've had very strong trading, and I think people love to eat seafood, and we're now capitalising and our strategy of being by the water in sort of slightly rough around the edges, sort of coastal towns is really working. People in the UK are rediscovering how beautiful our coastal communities are, and of course they want to come and eat seafood. We've got 3 new restaurants that we are signed up to open. Salcombe, Sidmouth and Topsham, and so we're committed to opening those in the next 12 to 18 months, looking at the order in which we do it. And we are focusing heavily on building our seafood at home. We want to take our 450,000 restaurant customers into home consumers of seafood as well as restaurant customers. And also I've been working on a project again. It was another COVID birth, if you like, which was canning seafood. I love canned seafood. I think it's always been the kind of it's what my gran used to feed me or feed the cats. It was never something that was highly regarded. It was only ever sardines or that mackerel in tomato sauce. But in Europe, it's revered, and so I decided that we were going to be the first people to do it in England. So I teamed up with an amazing canner in Spain, and I'm going to pre-answer the question why Spain. And it's really where the craft is. I mean, you see this craftsmanship of seafood being canned by hand by these communities of ladies. It's just fantastic. It really is wonderful. So we send prime British seafood when there's a glut of it, when the season is good, when the fish is right, to Spain, can it to our recipes and bring it back. And I've loved the project. And we've been selling 10,000 tins a month. It's been phenomenal. And so that's the future for us, really. Just keep on going slowly with restaurants. Do a lot more for our people, a lot more for the communities, build a business with great culture, and just do these little diverse projects that I love.
So, in terms of the balance of the business, then looking at the finances of it, how much is the restaurants? How much is the fresh fish? How much is canned fish going to be going forward in terms of the spread of your business?
Well, the restaurants we're primarily a restaurant company, but what we recognise now is that we will probably morph at some point in the next 3 or 4 years into viewing us as a seafood company, because of course we'll be selling seafood through different channels. Restaurants will be one of them. People at home will be one of them. We sort of have loose conversations that if seafood at home was 1 or 2 restaurants worth of EBITDA, that would be fantastic. But actually, there's a kind of like an underlying belief that we could really kind of double the size of the company with what we're doing over time. But we are primarily a restaurant company, and that's what we'll carry on focusing on, that real delivery of what we do.
And John, obviously, Rockfish is one of your interests. I mean, how are you seeing the market? I mean, you've been dare I say it, been around a long while. You've done a lot. How do you see the opportunities for the market going forward?
It's a difficult time. You have to be honest about it. With coming out of COVID, with loads of us have got debt around our heads, which we didn't have before. Consumers we're lucky because we're down by the coast. We've really benefited from the staycations. We've got fabulous locations, which are the locations of the future. So I think Rockfish is in a particularly good position. And it's tough for a lot of other people who are, facing landlords with unreasonable expectations and the consumer who is still nervous. So I think it's a difficult time, but underneath just the power of a good culture in restaurants that Will has built in Hawksmoor, that Tom and James have built in Pizza Pilgrims, that Mitch has built in Rockfish. It is a great place to work and a great place to build a career. So, and as an investor, I mean, we're actually helping somebody. Well, I'm helping two people get new locations and do things. And I'm telling you, one of them is the best chef, as far as I'm concerned, in London, who did Racine, Henry Harris. I'm spending my time helping him. I'm going to invest in what Henry does next. Because whilst there's a lot of nerves about this industry, there are some jewels like Mitch, like Henry, who really want support and should get it. I actually think with this new diversification, with people being very clever about seeing their brands and channels of distribution, I think we've got a whole new investor angle that should get capital back interested in the sector. And I just it's been tough, and people, you and I know, people open too many too soon of too bland a type. But now we're getting a lot of very good propositions that are unique, and I think this industry is just going to go and grow because it's a great place. If you've got good people, don't watch Boiling Point, the movie, whatever you do, because I made the mistake of watching that last night. Mitch, have you seen it? If you haven't, don't watch it. But despite that, actually, I visited Poole and Weymouth Rockfishes pretty much unannounced the week before last, and was blown away by how much people like working there. And I just love being involved in it. And so I think we it's tough at the moment, but there's some real opportunities, and I'm still investing. I love it.
Well, there's a whole nother conversation about people, which we won't do now, but in terms of the image of the industry. But obviously, you guys are creating something really special. And John, good to know that your enthusiasm for the industry is still as strong as ever, and also Mitch, keeping seafood alive. In fact, more than that, really inspirational from both of you. And so, thank you to John and Mitch, and make sure you go and buy the book. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Well, thank you again to Mitch and John for that fascinating conversation about the journey that Rockfish has taken through lockdown and the COVID restrictions. Very exciting times ahead for those guys. But to remind you, this series of podcasts is sponsored by Bidfood, Fourth, Stint and Zonal. The Peach Podcast is always free to listen to, and to find us, search Peach 2020, the top table on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or in any app that supports podcasts. All of our podcasts will be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. And don't forget to like, rate and subscribe to make sure you don't miss our future episodes.
Podcast from Peach 2020, hosted by Peter Martin.